So we've made our run cycle in place, and now what we need to do, before we decide to translate it forward, we need to make sure that our first pose of the cycle and our last pose of the cycle match up, just to keep it clean. So select everything on your character, grab the last pose, copy, go to the first pose, and paste. So now if you click between your first and last pose, they should be pretty identical. You shouldn't see any difference between the two. Now to keep this simple, I'm going to again hide the arms because the three main controls that will be translating in space will be the controls for the legs, and in my shot they're translating in Z, so they'll be going in this direction, and the body control, which will also be translating in Z. So if I grab all of these controls and I translate them over, that will move our entire character. And you'll notice the knees are bending back. So we'll also have to, as the character gets closer to the knees, push them back. Now we're ready to translate this character through space. So we're done running in place. Each step now is going to move our character forward. Starting from the first frame where our cycle begins, this is where, if you remember our previous animation, our character is moving into a cycle. This is the first frame where he stops moving, he stays still. You can see this clearly you should be able to see this clearly in your curve editor. If you select the body, which is moving forward, you'll see where it just flattened out. That's where our cycle has begun. So what we need to do now is make this translate forward. So this curve basically needs to continue moving. Now the challenges behind doing this is we can't just move it up arbitrarily because we have feet cycling with it. We have the feet moving at a certain rate, and we got that working for our cycle. And while we can do adjustments on it, initially we want to try to make that more painless. So the question is, how far do we translate the body in Z? How far up do we bring this curve? How steep do we make this curve so that it still works with the speed that these feet are cycling? Remember earlier when I mentioned that you want to keep the foot sliding across the ground, keep that curve constant? The reason I had you do that is the curve, this linear curve, this straight line when the foot is going across the ground, is the steepness of this character. That's how fast the character is moving. That's how fast the foot's moving across the ground, and that's how fast we're going to have our character move forward. Now, if we want our character to move faster or slower, we'll worry about that next. But for now, we just want to get this character moving forward as painless as possible. This is how we make the character move forward at the rate that the feet are moving across the ground. So eventually, what this curve is, when we have our character translating, this curve is going to look like this. It's going to be flat because that represents a foot with all of our character's weight on top of it. It's what's pushing us along. So that isn't moving forward or back. It's locked in place. The character, the body above it, is going to be moving at the speed that the foot is moving back. So one way to do that, I'm sure there's many tools out there that let you do that, but assuming we don't have those tools, one way to do that is you look at this curve. We're going to count how many squares are between this. So say if this line is the sloping end of a triangle, we're going to count the height and width. So it looks like we have 1, 2, and a third up, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 across. Now this straight line, all of these keys can just be deleted because there's no information on them. They were just keyed while we're doing the ups and downs of the other curves. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to count from the point where the cycle begins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 across, and 1, 2, and a third up. So see this part right here, where my cursor is. I'm going to raise the key up until the line intersects with that point, and make it linear. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 7 across. And now, just to make it easier if you want, this is because this is halfway at a halfway point. Just to kind of remember that it's halfway on that square. I'm going to bring it down. And now I'm going to go up to 1, 2, and a third, which is roughly around here. So it's 1, 2, and then bring this back up to where it was, which was half, about right there. I'm just eyeing it. So now this angle should be about the same as this angle in degrees. I mean, and if you wanted to get like a protractor out and measure it, you could. I'm sure there are tools that make that easier, but this is, if you understand what's going on at this level, understand what's going on here, and then someday when you get the tool, at least you know what's happening under the hood. You're better prepared. So now we have, for our first full cycle, the character moving forward. His body is moving forward at a rate that we believe is pretty close to where the feet would take him. Now, clearly the feet are not yet moving him forward because they're still staying in place in the cycle. So now our next step is going to be moving those feet forward on all the keys that they're on. So the way we'll handle this is we'll grab the Z translations on both feet, and we'll go through frame by frame, key by key on all the keyframes, and we're going to translate it forward. When I do that, every frame down is going to move with it. So I'm not just moving one frame at a time. I'm moving one frame and all the frames following that, because they're all going to be moving forward. Starting with the front foot, I'm going to grab all the keys, and I'm going to just translate all these keys up. I'm going to move the foot forward to where I believe it should be. If you're not too confident where that foot should be because you worked it out in the cycle and you don't quite remember, you can just pull up a play blast that you had of the in-place cycle and look at the frame that you're on and compare and just say, oh, well, maybe this was a little bit forward or maybe it was a little bit back. And just in case you need to be sure. So I know that for a fact that this is about to make contact, so I'm going to move it forward a bit to where the knee is bent a little bit. And then the next frame, I think that feels just about right. I'm kind of eyeing this because I know the general feel that this run should have. Okay, so now I've adjusted it so the character's moving forward, the foot is making contact. So now this foot is coming forward, and now we're reaching the point in the curve where we have this straight line. And that's the point where the foot is dragging across. Now, we know if we got the angle right on the body, we know that this line should be flat. If everything works out all right, it should feel okay. And it does, I believe, except for he broke his leg. Also remember that these knees are going to need to be moved forward. Grab all the knees, and I'm going to move them forward. Cool. Okay. Now, let's look at that foot. Let's see how that feels. So we flatten out that line, and it's pushing off. Doing all right, not too bad. This is the point where that ends, and then the next few frames is dragging behind because we have to continue moving it forward.